and to be able to go through with us. We've been looking at angels, and tonight I'm going to share some stuff that is a little different. You may have heard this before. Maybe you've never heard things that I'm going to talk about. And here's the deal. I'm giving you my explanation how I interpret the Word of God. I'm a line-by-line, verse-by-verse kind of guy. And you're going to hear some stuff that sounds pretty magnificent tonight even. I have a professor. We kind of went round and round when I was in seminary about this kind of stuff. And but I had another professor who taught it to me. How about that? He was down the hallway. It's like, have you guys not talked or whatever like that? And I was a theology major, not an Old Testament major. And there's different ways you can approach the Bible. I believe in systematic theology. I think what's ever written in the New Testament applies to the Old Testament and vice versa. If it's in the Old Testament, it applies to the New Testament. It doesn't change. All of a sudden, it doesn't all of a sudden change from this standpoint. But that's systematic theology. Then there's what they call historical theology, where you cannot interpret an early passage. Like, say, we're going to look at Genesis 6 tonight. I can't interpret that with 2 Peter or the book of Jude. I beg to differ on that. Jude is quoting from that. He's giving it as an illustration, and so is 2 Peter. So that's why I believe in systematic theology rather than historical theology. As we go through demons or talk about angels, we're talking about demons. And we started talking about angels several weeks ago. And we talked about where angels came from, that they were created. I think they were all created at one time, all right? They don't reproduce. They don't have new angels. God doesn't say, okay, I need a new set or whatever like that. He created all the angels he was ever going to create. I believe he created them on the first day. This is a Garyism now. Some people have disagreements, and that's okay. It's okay. You can be wrong if you want to, all right? It's up to you. No, I thought that's funny. Okay, you get it. The angels were created on the first day. On the first day after God created everything, he looked at it and said, and it was good. And then we go to the second day. He separates the water above from the water below and a few other things, but it's more separating the water above from the water below, and that was the second day. And he goes to the third day. All right, he separates the water from the dry land. And God saw that it was good. And he starts going in chapter 4, creating the animals and the birds and all that. And he says it was good. The fifth day, it was good. The sixth day, it was good. The seventh day, it's very good. There's only one day he didn't say it was good on. What day was it? It was the second day. It was Monday. All right? And what's the old song say? Rainy days and, Mondays. Well, I don't know. Maybe God hates Mondays too or whatever like that. He didn't say it was a good day, all right? But I have some people say, well, he said it was very good at the very end. Yes, he did. He did say all of his creation was good, but there was a part that fell. Now, the question is this, and this is one of the things I got into Twitter about. I was going back and forth with a couple people on this. First of all, it started about, could you lose your salvation? All right, some guy asked the thing and said, well, basically God would have to lose you. And it's like, I agree in things. And we got talking, and then some guy used angels, said, well, he started talking about angels and how they're kept. And I let them know that there were angels that fell. They were fell. And by the way, angels cannot be redeemed. They are unredeemable. There is no remedy for the angels that fell. The ones that fell, they fell forever. And the ones who didn't fall were confirmed forever. All right? And so that's, someone asked, a great question was, what would Satan induce or speak to other angels or challenge other angels, that 1/3 of them would fall with him? What could have happened? Because I believe the fall happened on the second day. And I don't know. That's a tough one. It's one of those where the Bible is silent. And Deuteronomy says the silent things belong unto God. But anyways, you'll see that when he talks about that, says that when the angels fell, 1/3 of them fell. So the ones that fell, we call demons, and that's our study now. We've gone from angels, talking about how angels minister to us, and they minister to people and the things that they do, to what demons do, because there are a group of angels that are fallen that are called demons. And what we want to do is look at this, go to school on this tonight, and we're going to get into some really interesting things that maybe you have some questions about. You're welcome to write me at garyjarrett@stuartheights.org and ask me a question. Be more than happy to try to answer it, do what I can. If you'll notice at the very beginning, though, we have the abode of demons. The abode of demons. And basically, where do demons live? Do they go to hell every night? Okay. Is that what they do? Now Satan and the demons go to hell, right? No, they're as far away from that place as they can get. They have nothing to do. That's their ultimate doom, all right? It's already been created, though, all right? God has laid it out there, but that is their ultimate. That's not where they hang out, all right? But they're free to roam the earth and the heavenlies. You notice in here, we have some demons are free to roam the earth and the heavenlies, and you'll see that in Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1, Satan and some angels, and they are fallen angels, come before God to ask him questions. Same thing happens in Job chapter 2. But they are free to roam the earth and the heavenlies, all right? Some demons are bound in hell. You said, Brother Gary, I thought you said no demons were in hell. No, there are some. And there's something that happened that God bound them in this place called, and it's not the word for hell really, it's the word Tartarus. It's the deepest part of hell is what it would be, Tartarus. They are bound because of a sin that was committed in the days of Noah. I want you to take your Bibles. If you have a Bible, if you have a phone, or you have a mobile device, you can get your Bible on. Just go to 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2. I'm going to be reading from the New King James Version. 2 Peter chapter 2. The New King James Version. And what we're going to do is, what I'm going to do tonight is I want to trace down that sin that was committed. That God would take some demons and bind them in Tartarus. What is it that they did? Matter of fact, think about this. It was so bad that God destroyed the entire world, wiped it clean except for Noah and his family. That was it. What could have happened? And we're going to get into that. That's what we need to look at to find out what was going on back then. Look what he says here in 2 Peter chapter 2. He says in verse 4, it says, "For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell." Now, these aren't just the ones that fell, but it's some angels that sinned. He cast them down to hell. And that word hell right there is the word Tartarus. It's the only time it occurs in the entire Bible. Right there, just that one time. Right there, he cast them down to Tartarus and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment. So these demons have already been bound. They are in hell and they're waiting for judgment. But there are other demons that are free to roam. Why? We're going to look at that. Look what it says in the very next statement, verse 5. "And he did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world and on the ungodly." What's it say there? Basically, God destroyed the entire world. It's the same time that those angels were bound in a place called Tartarus. And it's something they did during the days of Noah, that God would wipe the entire earth with water. He would drown everybody, except Noah and his family. So if we want to look at that, what we need to do is go back and look at the flood. Let's take our Bibles, turn all the way back to the front of your Bible, Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6. In Genesis chapter 6, let's look at the first 5 verses. It says, "Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful. And they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. He's limiting them. Back then, if you look at some of the people and how old they lived to be, very old. There's a guy by the name of Jared, one of my ancestors, all right? He lived to be 963 years old. He had a son, godly kids. Okay, his son's name was Enoch. Matter of fact, Enoch was so godly that he walked with God, and it said, and God took him. One night when Enoch was like 300 years old, God just said, "Enoch, you want to just go home with me?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd like that." And God just took him. But Enoch had a son, and his name was Jared. And Jared lived to be 969 years. I say, I can't, it's hard to believe. Yeah, it is. It's hard to believe. But back then, they got a whole lot of things going on back there. I remember we were talking about even the way the atmosphere was and stuff. People believe there was a cloud over it, knocked out the UV rays so where you wouldn't age and things. You didn't have to worry about eating sugar because you had no store you can go buy candy at or anything like that, so your teeth would be there. But 969 years of age, and then he died. You know what's interesting? Methuselah's name literally means this: when he is gone, then it will come. When he's gone, then it will come. Well, what's it? Okay. Well, when you start looking at, and you can do the math and add it up, and what happens is Methuselah dies the same year as the flood. I remember I figured that out one time. I was in church service, and my pastor was preaching. I wasn't paying attention. I had one of those ADD moments where I was out kind of running around, and I was looking through, and I thought, because I was wondering, I mean, here's Noah. He's preaching. What about all these other guys? Weren't these other guys trying to warn people? I mean, where was, like Methuselah, okay? I mean, surely he lived about the time when Noah was out doing this, right? So I started figuring out Methuselah, and I found out, guess what? He died the same year as the flood. So on the way out, my preacher was standing there shaking hands. I said, I got a question for you. Yes. Did Methuselah drown? He said, what? I said, did Methuselah drown because he died the same year as the flood? And I didn't know till many years later when I was in seminary and I was reading a book by M.R. Dahan, medical doctor. M.R. Dahan had revealed that the name Methuselah means when he is gone, it will come. Basically, it was a warning. He gave that to Enoch to name his son. It was after he had Methuselah that he walked with God. And he revealed that to Enoch that, you know what? Things are going to be fine on this earth, but when your son is gone, that's it. Now, could you imagine what it must have been like when Enoch came home, or when Methuselah came home late at night? It's like, wait a minute, is this the end of the world? God says it's going to be the end of the world. It was that year that he died that, boom, the flood came. When he's gone, then it will come. So God put that out as a prophecy to let them know. No one quite understood it. When he's gone, then it will come. Well, in here, it said, the Lord will not strive, my spirit shall not strive with men forever, verse 3. For he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. He's cutting them down from 8 to 900 years, all the way down to 120. Matter of fact, later on it goes to 70, which is how many years? 70. You get 70 years. And he says if you live past that, it's the grace of God or whatever. So some people live to be 70, 80. We had a lady at our church at the Sadi Daisy campus who was 106 years of age that just passed away. 106 years of age. So I'd get a picture with her every year at Christmas time, a selfie and stuff. I remember she was looking at the phone and says, how'd you put me inside that box? I said, just smile here. Come here. Right there. So, but anyways, man's years were cut. And then notice what it says in verse 4. There were giants on the earth in those days, also afterwards, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were the men of old, the men of renown. Now here's where it gets kind of dicey right here, okay? It's pretty interesting. I could have read that a dozen times, but it wasn't until I was in seminary and got involved with this passage here, and that's where I had my kind of debate with one of my professors. Matter of fact, he's the one that did the New King James Version of the Old Testament and just said, you're wrong. Okay, I refuse, to dig in there. I learned this in my theology class, but I want you to take a look at this. It's something that happened when the sons of God saw the daughters of men. That something happened there, that it was where God said, my spirit will not always strive with man. Then he talks about there being giants in the land at that time and afterwards also. Now there's a debate over that word giants right there and what it means. Matter of fact, when the Old Testament, it was written in Hebrew, by the way. And just to give you a heads up, you read Hebrew from the right to the left. You know how we go left to right? It's right to left. And there's no vowels. It's a very difficult language to read. I took 1 year of Hebrew. That was it. All right? But when they translated Hebrew into Greek so that the Jews, when they were Hellenized, could be able to read a Bible, aren't you happy to have a Bible in your language? I mean, you got so many things to choose from, all kinds of versions and things like that. And back then it was either the Hebrew or they finally put it into what's called the Septuagint. That's how they translated the Old Testament into Greek. And in there they translated that same word for giants as gigantos. But I want to tell you the Hebrew word tonight can mean something else other than giants. Were there giants after the flood? Yeah, there were giants after the flood. And I read all these stories on the History Channel, and they show these big giants that they found, skeletons and stuff. I'm not sure if I believe that kind of stuff or not. But the word there that's used for giants is Nephilim, and it actually means this in Hebrew. It's a couple of translations. It could be a giant, but it can also refer to a fallen one, someone that's fallen, or maybe an angel that is fallen. And what do we call angels that have fallen? They're called what? Demons, right. Not only did we see that, we saw when we were looking at demons also, a name for angels can be called the sons of what? Matter of fact, the only time it occurs is book of Job, Job 1:6 and Job 2:1. the sons of God came with Satan, and Satan had some questions. Well, why are they hanging out with Satan? Because Satan has angels that hang out with him. He was so slick that he took a third of them from heaven with him. But they come to approach the throne of God as sons of God. And it's the only time it's used in the Old Testament is right there is Job 1:6 and Job chapter 2, verse 1. But it's also used right here. Now, let me tell you what happens here. This is something that so moved God that he would bind demons who would be in Tartarus from that point. They've already been judged. They're there. But other demons are free to roam. And he would wipe the face of the earth clean. Now, there are two versions, and I'm going to share both versions. There's really a third one. It doesn't have a lot of credibility, though, the third one. But there are two versions of this, okay? And you have to make your choice on what you believe about this, all right? Here's the first version. The sons of God. In the first version, it's this. The sons of God are a godly line. They're believers. It's all the believers. Did they have only believers? Yeah, there were people that were believers. Which ones got on the ark? You think any unbelievers missed it? Believers missed getting on the ark? There were believers. But he talks, some people believe that the sons of God are the believers. All right? And so here's the sin that was committed. Believers marrying unbelievers. Is that wrong today? Let me say this. It's definitely a poor choice. If you're committed to Jesus Christ and you go out and marry an unbeliever, here's what's going to happen. You're married. Listen, I love how Plato described what true love is. He uses the word philos, okay? And basically on philos, you got A and B. And between here, you have all these things that you agree upon. That's why when I marry people, I want to know, what do you guys have in common? Well, she looks real good. And he's a nice guy. Okay, what else do you have in common? Do you guys like camping here? No, I want to find out, make sure they have all these things in common, because that's what philos is about, and that's what brings people together. What are the things they have in common? Now, what's interesting about philos, love, it's like a triangle. As you move up to the apex of the triangle, the base gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Here's the question. What is the one thing you hold on to when you've forsaken everything else? All these things that you had in common, what is the one thing that you would hold on to when you have forsaken everything else? Usually when I counsel, I got couples that'll look at me and they'll get tears in their eyes. They'll look at their spouse and they'll say, I'll hold on to Jimmy. And Jimmy goes, I'll hold on to Susie. I said, that's the wrong answer. You're done. All right. wrong answer, right? It's like, what do you mean? I thought that was supposed to be the right answer. I'd hold my wife to the end. If you're a believer, when that base gets smaller and smaller and smaller, the one thing you'll hold on to is your relationship with Jesus Christ. You know what? If you'll do that, you'll be even closer to your spouse. And that's why Paul says, be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. Why is he saying that? Because he wants you to grow closer and closer and closer together to where at the top you're committed to Jesus Christ. If you marry an unbeliever and you're a believer, instead of growing this way, you're going to grow that way. And it's not going to be a very happy marriage. Now, is that what he's talking about right here? It could be. That's what some people believe. That believers married unbelievers, all right? Well, keep that in your thought. Look what it says down in verse 4. There were giants on the earth in those days, also afterwards when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that intent of his thought and heart was evil only continually. Did you notice what it said about their kids? Again, look at the very last statement about the kids in verse 4. Those, he said, they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men, the men which were of old, the men which were renowned. In essence, what he's saying is when believers marry unbelievers, their kids are different. Their kids are different. So their children are there. So the sin is this: believers marrying unbelievers. And the Bible forbids that, 2 Corinthians 6:14. And their children are different. I got a question. Are they? Anybody know people that one of them's born-again believer committed to Jesus Christ and the other one is not, and their kids are different or whatever? Can you tell the difference on a football field? Can you tell the difference out there? They're a lot smarter or something like it? No, the kids are pretty much the same. Here's the problem. Believers still marry unbelievers today, do they not? I heard one yes. How about yeah, they do. Believers marry unbelievers today. And if this sin was so bad that God destroyed the entire earth, why would he allow it to continue to go like that? Well, believers marry unbelievers today. Their children, by the way, are no different. I've seen people come to saving faith, like a husband come to saving faith and the wife not. And the wife really wants nothing to do with going to church. And matter of fact, she didn't marry him to go to church. And so it ends up being a split, divorce, or they don't get along with each other. And I've seen vice versa, where the wife comes to saving faith in Jesus Christ and the husband doesn't. But I can tell you this, you're not going to tell any difference in their kids. You cannot tell one bit of difference. Not when it comes to strength or smartness or whatever like that. They're kids. Kids are kids. As a matter of fact, those kids will make their own choice and decision down the road, whether they're going to follow after the things of God or reject the things of God. They have a better chance if mom and dad are both committed to Jesus Christ. Is that not true? Right? Yeah. What's the old saying? Let's see. I went to church because I was on drugs. Or I had drugs or whatever. I heard a guy say this one time. He said, I was drugged to church every Sunday night, and every Wednesday. Yeah, I think if a parent takes them to church, and by the way, your kids, I always like this when the parent says this. We're gonna let Bubba make up his own mind whether he wants to come to church tonight, come to church on Sunday. I remember talking to a deacon at my last church. This is 30 years ago. I said, really? You gonna let Jeff make his own mind up whether he comes to church or not? Yeah, he's 12 years old. Okay, let me ask something. On Monday, is he allowed to stay home from school? He said, what are you talking about, Brother Gary? I'm talking about school. He gets up and goes to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Does he have to do that, or can he make up his mind and say, you know what, I'm not going to school today? No parent in their right mind would say, yeah, we do that, because he'll drop out of school in third grade, right? About first, second grade, they love it, man. About third and fourth grade, when they start realizing it's some more to school than what you can imagine, it's not going to be like that. I think Sunday school is just as important, if not more important, than Monday through Friday school. How about that? I think they have a better chance of coming to saving faith in Jesus Christ when they have parents that are committed and make sure that their kids go, whether they like it or not. You know, I don't know if I've ever known anybody that's had a kid that came up and said, man, you ruined my life taking me to church. But I've heard a lot of them say, I wish they would have told me about the things of God when I was a kid. I want to hesitate. I want to share a story here, but I'm going to bank on it. She's not watching. I had a cousin. We grew up. Our families would get together like all families do. And on my mom's side, there was a lot of drinkers. They all drank. All my uncles were alcoholics. And a couple of them, it cost them big time. One of my uncles was paralyzed, not quite paralyzed, but broke his neck, diving off a garage into a swimming pool when he was drunk. His buddies went in, fished him out, got him on the thing, bounced him up and down because he was passed out. His neck was broken and stuff. But we grew up in that kind of atmosphere. Go to weddings, see people pass out, go to family reunions, have a fight. I had one of my cousins who is a nurse. She's in Knoxville now. And knowing that I was a pastor, she wrote to me and said it must have been a blessing growing up in church. I said, yeah, it was challenging. But she said this, I wish they would have taken me to church. She said, I'm a believer now, but I would have sure liked to have known Jesus when I was young. Makes all the difference in the world. Well, in here, that's part of the thing. Believers still marry unbelievers. Their children are no different. And here's a question, right? It's the sons of God and the daughters of men. So, in essence, what you're saying, if that's the sin, believers marrying unbelievers, the only people that married were the sons of God, men, and the daughters of women. So what it's saying is the sons of God are righteous dudes, and all women are bad. Is that what it's trying to teach? Now, I didn't say that. If you're streaming and watching this, I don't want to see this cut, clip, whatever. Here's what Pastor Gary said, whatever. But in essence, that's what they're saying. There was no daughters of God marrying, sons of men. It was the sons of God and the daughters of men. And when they produced an offspring, that was different. Well, in here, that's the first view. Believers marrying unbelievers. That happens all the time. God doesn't destroy the world. He's going to do it again. But he says it's going to be as it was in the days of Noah, and we'll talk about that. Here's my view. This is the view I hold right here. And I'm gonna spend the next 3 weeks backing this up, okay? So, first of all, sons of God, I believe, are angels. Why? Because he says so in Job 1:6. The sons of God come with Satan before the throne of God, and they have a question for God. It also occurs in Job chapter 2, verse 1. Now, why is it the sons of God? Remember we talked about angels? There are three genders. There are three genders in Greek. Angels are always referred to as what? Tell me. As men. All angels are men. Again, that's not a chauvinist thing. That's just a factual thing. Show me one woman in the Bible that's an angel. It's not. The closest there is in Zechariah 5 when you have evil personified with wings as a stork. That's not the same. They're never called an angel. All angels that appeared to humans, they appeared as men. Every one of them. Well, Brother Gary, I went to a Christmas program last year, and there was this lady had long blonde hair and wings, and okay. All angels are male. And basically, here's the sin. Angels with women. What do you mean with women? They came together. The sons of God came together with the daughters of men. What happened? Well, take a look at what it says. Verse 4, there were giants on the earth, and I'm going to say, and that's fine if it does mean giants. I believe it means fallen ones, okay? And I think he's talking about the demons. There were fallen ones on the earth in those days, and also afterwards. And by the way, they say, well, there's giants after the flood too. Well, there are demons after the flood too, right? Not all demons are bound, only the ones that sinned here, but he said they were there, the fallen ones. He said there were fallen ones on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, which are fallen ones today, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. That's their children. Are those children different than most children? Mighty men, men of renown? What does that even mean? I'm glad you asked that. Let's look at the Hebrew words and what he's talking about in this statement right here. It says, these sons of God came together with daughters of women. Their children were mighty men. Here's what the Hebrew word means for a mighty man. Someone that's strong, that's a champion, and they are the mightiest. They're strong, they're champion, and they're the mightiest. Next word is where it really gets interesting. It says, which were of old. And that's a very interesting word right there. Let me tell you what that word means. It's used of covenants that God makes. When God made the Abrahamic covenant, by the way, did anybody see President Trump sign the covenant or the peace treaty? Yeah, I hope he's not the Antichrist. The Antichrist usually signs a peace treaty with Israel and them. But he signed a peace treaty, and do you see what it was called? What kind of treaty was it? It was called the Abrahamic Treaty. And it's a peace treaty that's being made there. But Abraham had what's called an everlasting covenant that was made with him and God. David had that covenant as well. It's the Davidic covenant. There's a land, a person, Abraham. There's a king involved. There's a new covenant as well. They are unconditional, everlasting covenants. The word that's used here, take a look at verse 4 again. It says, there were giants on the earth in those days. Also afterwards, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men, they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old. That word of old is the same word that's used for the everlasting covenant, or something that is eternal. In essence, what he's saying is, these children, not only were they strong champions, in Hebrew, the olam, they were everlasting forever. They were immortal. They were immortal. What does that mean? Well, it means they can live forever. What's that? Well, we're going to get to that. You're jumping the gun right here, okay? Notice what it says next. Remember what we said. Angels don't reproduce other angels, right? And one of the reasons they don't is they're only male angels. There are no female angels. So when God created, he created all the angels that were there and stuff. Now, it doesn't say that angels can't reproduce. One of the questions we're going to answer next week, and this is a question that needs to be answered. He says, in the kingdom of God, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but they're like the angels of heaven. Did you notice what he said? They're like the angels where? Yeah, he didn't say just angels. If he just left it at that, then you have a pretty good argument. It says angels don't reproduce. No, it just says they don't marry. Do you have to marry to reproduce? Can you reproduce without being married? Yeah. Well, they produced an offspring. And it says they were mighty, they were strong, they were champions, they were immortal, considered that. Notice what else it says. They were men, and they bore children to those. They were mighty men who were of old, men of renown. In essence, what it says, they were, that word men of renown is the translation of, it's the translation, the word of famous or legends. They were famous or legends. Now, saying all that, here's a question. What happened? What about these kids that were born to them? Well, first of all, one of the things it says, they're famous in their legends. Are there legends out there of famous people that are absolutely strong, mighty, fearsome? They're different than most mortals? Anybody grow up stories like that? Anybody ever heard of like Hercules? Anybody know how Hercules, how they say he was born? And now this is mythology, all right? And let me share something with you. We're going to look at some stuff that comes from mythology, and I want you to look at it. I'm not saying that they're right. I'm just saying that where did this idea come from? And by the way, when Noah got off the ark, he had his sons who grew up with these guys. They know them. Man, they went to school with them. Seemed like every time this one guy got the football, he scored a touchdown and nobody could stop him, man. He's like strong, absolute, more strength than anybody else out there. Why? Well, because of where he's from, how he's brought into this world. Yes, they were. We'll talk about that as well. What happened to them? That's why God wiped them from the face of the earth. There's something about water and demons. I've told you this before. I'm not quite sure what it is. It's the one day that God didn't say it was good. Separated the waters above from the waters below. In our atmosphere, I guess it's moisture up and through there and stuff. And then the waters below. The earth was when they say the earth was covered by water, it's been covered by water twice. How about that? On the second day of creation, it was covered totally. All right. And when God flooded it with Noah. And what happened on the second day? Again, that's where I believe that the angels fell, the demons fell. And here you have the same thing. God's come and said, by the way, he said he'll never destroy it by water again. But I can't promise you anything about global warming. That is going to happen, okay? It's 2 Peter. He even talks about it. He's going to burn the world up. That's what God's going to do and make all things new again, differently. All right. So what's going on here? Well, I want you to turn to the next page. I'm just going to give you an introduction. We're going to come to this next week and look at this. Bill Brandenburg gave me a good point in here to add at the very beginning of here. I was trying to think of a way to introduce this topic, and I love it. Things that make you say, Great point, Bill. Things that make you go, And what are those things? Well, that's what we want to talk about. Did you know that every culture has the story of the flood? Every culture has a flood story. Do the Hebrews? Yeah, it's right here, Genesis 6. Everybody has a flood story, all right? Even the Greeks, the Romans, the Linka Indians, the people in South Africa, the Arabs, they all have a flood story. There are hundreds and hundreds of flood stories that are out there. And they all believe the same thing. Isn't that wild? And yet people try to deny the ark and the flood up in, of course, it didn't happen up in Kentucky, but that's where the ark is resting now, right? And it's not Noah's ark, it's Ken Ham's ark, all right? Right? So that's a joke, okay. But it's up in Kentucky. And by the way, when you look at what the other flood stories talk about, especially the Gilgamesh one, I mean, he built a square box. Think about it, a square box. And what did he put on there? The first thing, the whole world is going to be wiped from the face of the earth. And so what does he put on there? Gold and silver. What would you put gold and silver in your boat for? You know, it's not like when you get off, you're going to go to First Tennessee and put a deposit down here. I want you to take my money here, right here. That. What? What did Noah put? Noah took everything he'd need after a flood. He took the animals on that God said that he would need. Matter of fact, did you notice the clean animals, the ones that they could eat? There wasn't just 2. There was 5 of every kind right there that were coming on. 7, not 5. 7 of them that were coming on. 5 extras, okay? Not only that, took his family, took the clothing, took everything they needed, took documents. I'm sure they took documents on there, things that they would reveal. Stories that his sons could tell later on. Think about that. I think that's what happened. It just started passing. As they started repopulating the earth, there were stories that the brothers would talk about. Remember Hercules? How about Atlas? How about that? You remember him and stuff like that? Who's Atlas? Anybody know who Atlas is? You know who Atlas is? Okay. By the way, anybody know who Hercules' father is? Who is said to be? Zeus. Zeus is looked at as a what? A god. A lot of the pagans look at him as God. This is where it gets really interesting. You remember one of the reasons Satan was cast out of heaven, he said this in Isaiah, I'm trying to remember the chapter, 12 I think it is. He said this though, the last statement, I will be as God. And by the way, he desires worship. Later on, when we get into Satan and talking about him, you're going to find out that without the Bible, you couldn't tell the difference between him and Jesus Christ. What? Yeah, you won't be able to tell the difference. You got to have the Bible to be able to tell the difference. You see in Revelation chapter 6, you see a white horse rider come running out, and everybody says, that's Jesus Christ. His truth is marching on. That's not Jesus. He's a Christ, but he's not Jesus. Jesus Christ is over in Revelation 19. He has many crowns. He has a sword. The guy in Revelation 6 doesn't have a sword. He has a bow. Why does he have a bow? That's a good question. I actually had a youth teach me what this is, what that bow is. On my way out, I was teaching a whole series on Islam, and one of the kids said, do you know who the first archer in the Bible was? I said, archer, like the singing group, the archers, Archies? He said, no. An archer, a bow and arrow guy, the very first one in the Bible. Anybody know who it is? His name was Ishmael. Anybody know who Ishmael's descendants are? The Arabs. That's why there's always been that fighting back and forth. The Arabs believe that they're the inheritor, should get the inheritance from Abraham. They were firstborn, yeah, but they weren't born. They were born to the bondwoman. It was Sarah that born Isaac. But Ishmael was an archer. Maybe that has something to do with the guy in Revelation chapter 6 coming back with a bow with no heirs. He comes to bring peace, right? He's going to sign a peace treaty with Israel, just like we've done recently. And I agree with Jeffers, the pastor in First Baptist Dallas. I don't know if you know who he is. He came on and said, hey, listen, this is great, but it's not going to last. Just be honest with you. He said, I love what everything is happening and stuff, but it's not going to last. And it's not. It's not going to last. But what we're going to do is next week we're going to get into this, and I'm going to take you through some folklore and some mythology, and I want to let you know there's a difference. I'm not trying to say push this on about. I'm trying to show you where the Bible is coming from in some of these statements. Is Zeus ever mentioned in the Bible? Yes or no? Yes, he's in the Bible. He's in Acts chapter 10. Okay, it's when Paul and Silas show up at a place and they're trying to run him out of town. They think Paul is the spokesperson or whatever, but they believe that no, it was Barnabas and Paul. Barnabas is Zeus, and Paul's the speaker or whatever like that with them. If you look at Acts chapter 10, you'll see that in there. But Zeus is mentioned. Is Zeus significant to the Jewish people? Anybody know what happened to them in the Maccabean revolt? What happened? It's where they came in and they overthrew the temple and overthrew Jerusalem, and they made the priests sit down, and they made barbecue and asked them to eat it. They wouldn't eat it, and they slaughtered the priest. They desecrated the temple, and they set a statue up to who out front? You know who it was? It was to Zeus. I'm going to show you even from the book of 2 Maccabees. By the way, that's not a Bible. That's not a book of the Bible that we accept. Now we have people that are out there who have what's called the Apocrypha, and that's from the book of Maccabees. It's very inspiring reading, but it's not the inspired word of God. All right? Is it true? Yeah, it's pretty much true. You can go back in history and see the Maccabean brothers and the revolt, and they took over the temple, and they had what Hanukkah's all about. They rededicated the temple. That's the Hebrew word for Hanukkah. They dedicated it, the temple back. But they set a statue up to Zeus. Why did they do that? Well, you know what? Demons desire worship. And in the Old Testament, and as they're going through the different places and going to battles, they're worshiping strange gods that Moses lets them know they are nothing but demons that you are worshiping. Why? Demons desire worship. Satan does as well. You see a group that are fallen in Genesis 6, they produce an unredeemable race. That's why I think God destroyed the entire world. If angels can't be redeemed, how about a half angel, half man? Now I'm going to say this, and then we'll wrap it up real quick. I have a theory. Back before 9/11 happened, what used to be on the cover of every magazine, newspaper was talking about it. I saw. Anybody remember Dolly, the sheep, lamb, whatever? Yeah. What was special about Dolly? Dolly was cloned. She was cloned. They talk about cloning dogs. By the way, that's all they talked about was genetic engineering and DNA. All this, trying to manipulate it, the whole thing and stuff. And what they want to do is they want to get to a place where they can actually clone a person. There was a book when I was at the library, and I was studying this when I was in seminary, and I actually went down to the library. Remember when you used to go to the library? I remember I went down to the library, and this is when they recoded the books even. Matter of fact, put them in there. And I was looking for books on genetic engineering. And by the way, you know what the call numbers are for genetic engineering in the library? Yeah. The book, it's 660.6. Close enough for me, okay? I never forgot that, 660.6. I went over and looked over books that deal with genetic engineering. There's a guy that worked for Time Magazine, wrote articles, was their history or their religious editor in there, and no, he was the science editor for Time Magazine, and he wrote a book that man's already been cloned, and this is back in the 80s. There's a guy named Jeremy Cherfas over in England who wrote a book called, trying to remember what it was called. But anyways, he laid out a scenario on why they would genetically create people, clone them. If you have a bad heart, if you have a clone, you can go out and get your clone out of the freezer, take his heart out, and you got a new heart. You have a bad kidney, hey, you don't have to worry about wait for a transfer. You have a clone that you can get a kidney from and do that. And he talked about, I was just like blown away by that. But all of a sudden that stuff went, you don't hear anything about that anymore, do you? Here's a question. What if we're able to create somebody through genetic engineering through a clone? You know what a clone is? Basically, it's you without the regular process. They take some cells, they create another you, and if you have I have a mole right here. Where's right? I can't remember. It's on one of the side. I have a mole, all right? That same clone will have a mole right there, exact same place. Well, you're leading to me. Hold on. I was going to talk about my bunion first. He'll have a bunion there too. I just thought I had, big feet like Fred Flintstone. Daryl said, yeah, those are big. But he'll have the bunion, all right? Here's the question I asked. Okay, if genetic engineering happens, and I think there's a lot of stuff that's happening behind the scenes that we don't even know about. Say they're able to clone somebody. Here's a question. Clone comes to church. And I'm going to be careful how I say this because I may be welcoming him into our congregation 10 years from now. Come on in, brother, and stuff. He hears the gospel, wants to make a decision. Here's the question. If a person is genetically created as a clone, do they have a soul? And if they don't have a soul, what happens if they have children? Is this the sin that was created here in Genesis 6? Sons of God, daughters of men, an unredeemable race. And God said, that's enough. And Jesus says, as it was in those days, so also will it be when I come back to earth. It'll be just like that. Things that make you say, Next week, we're going to get into this. We're going to look at some of the stories of the flood that happened. We're going to look at Atlas. Atlas is a guy, that's who the Atlantic Ocean is named after. You ever heard of the lost city of what? The lost city of Atlantis, right. Who wrote that? Plato wrote that. He wrote it 400 years BC. And he said it happened, that there was a boat that was built, and this was something that was passed down to him. And he says it happened. This is great, because when everybody's talking about the world's billions and billions and billions and billions of years, he said it happened 9,000 years before then, right there. We're talking something a little closer than the billions and billions and billions of years. That's what you need if you want to see evolution happen. By the way, that's why you need the billions of years. It happens so slowly you can't even see it, right? Now, I believe there's a God, and I believe he created it, and I believe he sustains it as well. He is the one that flooded it and destroyed it, and he said he's coming back again. He's going to take us. Amen.